Rising star. The exact words many people associated Odell Beckham with. Now a 9-year veteran and Super Bowl champ, Odell Beckham had a temper early on in his career. A passion for a game can sometimes take over your good intentions, and not to put any kind of label on OBJ, he's cooled his head, but there were antics that I remember vividly growing up just 20 minutes from MetLife Stadium. I'd watch him every Sunday. We've seen episodes on the sidelines, screaming, throwing helmets, but nothing came close to this one game. After one of the most unforgettable rookie seasons in NFL history, Odell Beckham was already considered a top 5 receiver. Of course, we know that comes with a price, and that's all eyes on you. Kids wanted to be him. One-handed catches were just known as OBJs. Beckham was truly at his forefront. As for this guy, Josh Norman during this period had been in the league for 3 years already. A DB out of Coastal Carolina who had shown flashes but hadn't really stepped into that CB1 role until 2015. Known for his erratic and unique choice of words and personality, Norman never backed down from a challenge. Coincidentally, his story was very similar to the team he played for. Untapped potential, finally rising to the surface seemingly out of nowhere. The Carolina Panthers were unstoppable. As much as I'd like to say there are multiple examples of one-year wonder teams like this one, nobody truly did it like them. It was like watching a college team with a Heisman quarterback that was just faster and more physical than anyone who came in their way. December 20th, 2015. The undefeated juggernaut in the Carolina Panthers would come rolling into MetLife Stadium to face a Giants team just trying to barely keep their heads above water, facing a win-or-go-home scenario in this game. This game overall wasn't getting much thought except for the Odell and Norman matchup. Nobody thought it would be close, and rightfully so, but every game writes its own storyline, and this one would go down in infamy. Just a few plays in, this happened.
8. Manning, Beckham, open, dropped it. Working on Norman, and he could have put the exclamation point on the start of this day, and he raises his hand. That's on number 13.
And then a play later, we see what started it all. It was only the first quarter, and Josh Norman and Odell Beckham were already going at it. The first instance was light, but it seemingly came more from the side of Norman, as Odell Beckham really didn't do anything wrong. He was a blocker, engaged with the defender. He was just doing his job, and Norman took it slightly too serious, picking Beckham up as if to say, "I'm not letting you push me around." The message obviously didn't sit well, and the next time they got face to face, it was a lot more physical, with Beckham taking the shot.
And there's still not a flag down on the turf.
Well, Josh Norman was on him. They gave a little bit of help, and looked like Odell Beckham came back in and took a shot on Josh Norman, and you just don't know what all has happened on each of these plays. We saw on the first possession the scuffle that took place.
I'd have to say up to this point though, there really isn't anybody to blame. But it's all downhill from here. The guy Odell Beckham was fighting here was none other than Cortland Finnegan. Yes, the same Cortland Finnegan who got into one of the craziest fights in NFL history. Beckham continues to take any chance he can get at Josh Norman. Just 2 minutes before halftime, Beckham was catchless and the game was tied at just 7. A hard play fake with Olsen leaking out of the formation would lead to a touchdown to put Carolina on top. The Giants would then give the ball right back after a failed 4th down, and Carolina would go right down and score once again. The game would then really start to get away from the Giants as Carolina scored on their first possession of the second half. Odell was getting clearly frustrated. He would get another penalty called on him when matched up against Cortland Finnegan, seemingly turning all his energy and anger towards him and away from Norman. The Panthers were not fazed and wouldn't take their foot off the gas. They would score yet again, and the game looked all but over. Down 28, and with their best receiver being absolutely shut down, the Giants had no answer. But this is where things get crazy. Beckham would finally get his first pair of catches after 2.5 quarters, both on Norman. But even after what I'm about to show you, after yet another personal foul and basically turning this game into a street fight, they still would not throw him out of the game.
Here is 2nd and 15. Handoff is to Vereen, able to stay upright and picks up a first down. And there's Beckham again. What is going on? Have you seen a guy this thrown off his game before?
They ought to throw him out of the game, Joe, and they just might.
That's the end of this play. That's not it. It's here. And they go head to head. Then Norman gets in with a knee into the head of.
After that, and still somehow no ejections, the Giants would come roaring back, scoring 21 unanswered points, and then Beckham finally came to life.
Pass is caught. Beckham. Odell Beckham. Down inside the 20. Manning. End zone. Touchdown Beckham.
Ultimately, Cam Newton would do what Cam Newton does. He put the team on his back, setting the Panthers up for a game-winning field goal and leading the Panthers to victory. The game was wild and would cause widespread conversation across the NFL. Outside of the feud between these two, Cam Newton had what was by far the best game of his pro career. Newton threw for 340 yards and 5 touchdowns, along with 100 rushing yards, and the Giants would be knocked out of the postseason. The Panthers would move to 14-0 on the year. However, the beef between Odell and Josh was not over. After both players received multiple flags while somehow not getting ejected, the league took some action at least after things died down. Odell Beckham would end up being suspended for 1 game for hitting Josh Norman in the helmet, and Norman would end up being fined $26,000 for hits to the head and neck area and grabbing the face mask. After the game, Josh Norman was interviewed and had some things to say, saying, quote, "I feel like the league should take a look at what this guy was doing. I mean, it was ridiculous. I hope I pulled back the mask on who this guy really is." Nearly months after everything went down, Beckham wasn't done. He went out on Twitter and continued to add fuel to the fire, saying, quote, "That boy should thank me for all I've done for you. You're welcome though. LOL. Norman would then fire back at OBJ_3, as your boy Drake would say, "Trigger fingers turn to Twitter fingers, huh? I'm not going to subtweet you, I'm going to at you, so what's up?" Norman would also add in an interview with ESPN that he wasn't alone in this experience and that other players have told him that he, Odell Beckham, quote, "does that crap all the time. He lost so much respect from people for that little tantrum." Norman would also speak with Scott Fowler, author of Panther Rising, and said, "I don't care for that guy at all. Now, don't get me wrong, he's a good player or whatever, but he's not what he thinks he is. If you hit guys like that, if you completely jam them and shake them up, they can't relate to that. So they start making excuses like, oh, he touched me. They don't know how to respond because they never got hit like that. So me, every time I see him, I'm going to hit him in the mouth. I don't care." He gets to New York, he catches one stupid little ball, and everybody in New York loves this guy because that's the biggest amount of media in the world. So all that went to his big old head, and for some odd reason, he thinks he's somebody that he's not. The beef would cause changes to the league next season. A new rule was in place. A player with 2 unsportsmanlike conduct penalties will be ejected from the game. That just shows you the amount of impact that this really had on not only Odell Beckham and Josh Norman, but the league and players as a whole. Fast forward to next season, Josh Norman had been signed by the Washington Redskins, and as expected, media and fans knew that that meant only one thing. We'd be seeing Odell Beckham match up against Josh Norman twice a year. Round 2 was upon us, and it came in week 3 of the 2016 season on another day where it was all sun and tons of fans. Everything about that day was great, but everyone knew what the matchup entailed. I personally remember watching this game. I got a Jersey Mike's Philly cheesesteak, and it was beautiful out. I was ready for the matchup because as a 14-year-old, I was all in for the beef, and obviously I was more on the side of Odell Beckham. The referees would have to pull Odell Beckham and Josh Norman aside, something that I hadn't seen up to that point and I haven't seen since. Josh Norman would end up getting a flag first for a hit, not on Odell Beckham, but on Sterling Shepard. Odell would also start off slow once again, but ended up doing what he does and turning up late in the game.
First down. Here's Beckham. What a catch! A one-hander for number 13.
Bruton comes in.
Another catch by Beckham. Goes right through Norman. Still going. Inside the 10 to the 5.
It would end up being another good game, and Beckham overall would get the better of Norman in the stat sheet, but Norman's team would be the one to come out on top once again. The two would end up facing off again during the regular season finale. There were some shots taken mostly by Norman. Beckham seemed to have gotten the message and was keeping his cool. Norman, on the other hand, was taking his blows when he could, getting flagged in the process.
Pass is caught. There's Beckham. And that'll be a flag on Norman, and here we go again. It's Norman against Beckham, round 3. And this time, the flag's on Norman.
We don't know why he did it, but I'd have to assume Odell was yapping at him despite not doing anything physical. Beckham would suffer a season-ending ankle injury in 2017, and the two would never face off. After that, the feud died down after a year off from any potential matchup, and they would see each other again in 2018, but nothing would really come of it. The Beckham-Norman rivalry as we know it was now a thing of the past, with their most recent matchup coming in 2021 on Monday Night Football when Odell was on the Rams and Norman on the 49ers. The two are much older now. Norman is a free agent, and his time in the NFL is almost over. Beckham is also a free agent, but believes to still have a few years of quality football under his belt, and I can't blame him. The pair aren't enemies, and they aren't friends. It's now sort of just something that happened that the two look back on and scoff at, knowing that what happened was just a result of emotions getting the best of you. After everything that happened, an anticipated matchup turned into a boxing match, multiple penalties, fines, and a suspension, lots of quotes, a new league rule regarding unsportsmanlike penalties. The question, I guess, still remains. Who was really in the wrong? Of course, it's an old tale and everyone has moved on from any bad blood, but the highlights and stories still remain set in stone. The NFL once had these two players in their prime, and they unfortunately crossed paths when they wanted to prove themselves more superior than the other. The first matchup gave the most ridiculous game I've ever seen and one of the wildest, angriest, most violent on-field beefs in the history of sports.